In this lecture, let's update our editors to format our code. So far, we haven't established many rules for formatting our code. Formatting standards is a highly opinionated topic. If you ever work with a company, they're likely to have a few standards in place. At the beginning of this section, we installed an extension to help us write C# code. This extension has a formatter. Rather than constantly formatting our code, we can force the editor to format our code during saves. Let's check it out. In Visual Studio Code, navigate to File, Preferences, Settings. At the top right corner, there's a button for opening the settings file of the editor. If you hover your mouse over it, the tooltip should say Open Settings JSON. Click on it. The interface for modifying settings will modify this file. That begs the question, why aren't we using the interface for enabling formatting? By using the interface, formatting will be enabled for all languages. However, we can only apply a single formatter. We may want to use different formatters for various languages. I consider it to be a good idea to apply formatters to a specific language. Unfortunately, the interface does not provide this option. Therefore, we must directly edit the settings file. If you're not familiar with JSON, that's fine. Let's quickly discuss what it is. JSON is another language. Unlike a programming language, it's designed for storing data. Features such as conditional statements or functions are unavailable. JSON is regularly used for storing settings for a game. Alternatively, you can save player data into a JSON file. Visual Studio Code uses JSON for storing the settings of the editor. It's not hard to modify the settings. JSON follows a key value format. Inside this file, each setting is wrapped with quotes. Afterward, we have a colon character for separating the name of the setting from the value. To the right, we have the value of the setting. Multiple settings can be separated with a comma. Your file may not look like mine. I've modified my settings for web development. Copying my settings is not necessary unless you plan on getting into web development. Let's add new settings. At the bottom of the file, add a comma at the end of the last setting. Next, add a setting called C#. The name should be wrapped with double quotes and square brackets. Settings for specific languages can be created by writing the name of the language. In this case, we're applying settings to C#. After the colon character, add a pair of curly brackets. The curly brackets allow us to group settings. Within these curly brackets, add a new setting called editor.tab_size with a value of 4. Indentation is important for formatting our code. A majority of Unity developers use an indentation of 4. Next, add a setting called editor.formatOnSave with a value of true. This setting will instruct the editor to format the file on saves. Lastly, add a setting called editor.defaultFormatter. The value will be the following: ms-.net tools.c#. The value is the ID of the extension by Microsoft. You may be wondering, how do you get the ID of an extension? Let's check out the C# extension. Switch over to the Extension tab and search for the C# extension. On the page for the extension, there's a sidebar with additional information. Under the More Info section, there's a field called Identifier. This value represents the ID of the extension. By setting the default formatter setting to the extension's ID, Visual Studio Code will hand our code to this extension. From there, this extension will handle the formatting. Let's try testing the extension. Be sure to save the settings before proceeding. Next, open the robot file. Let's try writing poorly formatted code. For example, we can move the opening curly bracket to the same line as the namespace. Technically, this line of code does not produce an error. our code will work as it did before. If we were to save the file, the extension should automatically move the curly bracket into the correct position. Awesome! We've enabled formatting for our code. If your file is not being formatted, you may need to restart the editor. In the next lecture, let's wrap things up by talking about the documentation.